What would you do if the kindest thing you ever did cost you everything, and then gave you back something you never knew you'd lost? The Grand Plaza Hotel on a Friday night in October. Crystal chandeliers, warm gold light spilling across a room full of people who have never once worried about a water bill. A live orchestra playing something slow and honeyed. 500 guests. Senators, investors, executives in suits that cost more than 3 months of rent in Queens, moving through the ballroom with the easy, unthinking grace of people who have always belonged exactly where they stand. Weston Brooks does not belong here. He knows it the way you know your own reflection. His black vest is pressed. His hands are calloused. Underneath the hotel soap, if you got close enough, you'd still catch it. That faint trace of motor oil that no amount of scrubbing quite reaches. 35 years old, former Army, single father, waiter on his 4th hour of a Friday night shift. Very, very good at being invisible. Tomorrow morning, he'll be up at 5:30, school drop-off, then straight to the garage. Tonight, he pours champagne for strangers and tries not to think about the heating bill due Monday. The weight of a week already spent. Still 2 days left to carry it. His daughter is 7. Her name is Sophia Brooks, asthma-prone, bright as a June morning. Right now she's asleep at Mrs. Calloway's apartment down the hall, a retired school teacher, 71 years old. A porch full of wind chimes and a standing policy of refusing every dollar Weston tries to press into her hand. "You keep that for her college fund, honey. I get paid in the hugs." Weston Brooks had smiled when she said it, the way you smile at something that costs you nothing and holds you together anyway. Weston Brooks pours, smiles, moves on. And then he sees her, far corner of the ballroom, half hidden behind a potted fern like she's trying to dissolve into the wallpaper. A woman in an emerald gown, posture flawless, the kind learned at boarding school, the kind that costs something to maintain. But her hands are clenched in her lap, knuckles white. A scar runs from her left temple down past her jaw. Quiet. Permanent. Tracing the left side of her face the way a river traces a valley, without apology, without explanation. Just there. Presley Hale, 31 years old, CEO of Hale Innovations, daughter of the most powerful man in this room. And tonight, the cruelest whispers in the ballroom are circling her like flies at a church picnic. Honestly, why would she even come? Weston Brooks went still. Not from shock, from something older than shock, something that lived lower in the chest. The kind of recognition that bypasses the mind entirely and lands somewhere more honest. Because he had a daughter who came home from 2nd grade with red eyes, because some boy told her that her dad was just a waiter. He knew what it looked like, swallowing pain in a crowded room. He knew the particular kind of loneliness that had nothing to do with being alone. The kind that came from being surrounded by people who looked straight through you. He'd felt it every shift, invisible by design, present by necessity. He suspected Presley Hale had felt it every day for 4 years. That recognition, quiet, wordless, certain as weather, moved his feet before his mind gave permission. A coworker grabbed his sleeve. "Don't! You'll lose this job." Weston Brooks looked at him, then back at Presley. Then he reached into his vest pocket and touched something small. Folded. A pale blue handkerchief. Old cotton, worn soft. Monogrammed. Carried every single shift for 6 years. He tucked it close against his chest, and he walked across the ballroom. Nobody in that room knew what was folded inside that pocket. By the end of the night, every single person would. Stay with us. What happens next is the kind of moment that changes the shape of a life, sometimes 2 lives, all at once. The room did not go silent all at once. It went silent the way a church goes quiet before the final hymn. One voice at a time, then another, then a ripple, until there was nothing left but the soft breath of the orchestra and the sound of 500 people waiting to see what happened next. Weston Brooks stopped 3 feet in front of Presley Hale. She looked up, Her eyes were dark and steady, braced. The way a person braces themselves when they've been embarrassed enough times to start expecting it like weather. Like something that simply arrives. No warning, no mercy. He smiled, gentle, no performance in it. "May I have this dance?" A long pause. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "You're a waiter." "Yes, ma'am." He didn't flinch, didn't apologize for it. "And if you say no, I'll go straight back to work. No hard feelings, not another word. But if you say yes," he held her gaze, "it would be my honor. No strings attached, just kindness." Here is the thing about kindness offered without conditions. It is rare enough that most people spend the first few seconds looking for the catch. They turn it over, check both sides, search the fine print they've learned to expect. Presley Hale turned it over. Once, twice, then, slowly. The way a person moves when they are choosing to trust something they're not entirely sure they can trust. She placed her hand in his. The ballroom exhaled. Weston Brooks led her to the edge of the dance floor, not the center. He wasn't putting her on display. He was finding her a pocket of quiet inside the noise. An old instinct. Matthew Hale used to position the men on patrol the same way, always making sure no one's back was fully exposed. Some habits, once built, stay built. Her hand was cold, trembling. The fine, contained kind that only appears when someone has been holding themselves together for a very long time. They began a soft waltz, nothing complicated. His right hand settled at her waist, the way you handle something that matters. Careful, quiet about knowing it. Halfway through the first measure, her free hand drifted upward. A reflex, so practiced she probably no longer noticed it, moving to cover the scar along her jaw. Weston Brooks's hand followed hers. Gently, he guided it back down. "Don't hide it," he said. "Just for her. Scars are proof of what a person survived. That's not something to cover up." She didn't answer. Her breath caught once. Small, almost nothing. But he felt it. The way you feel a shift in a room before anyone speaks. She didn't lift her hand again. They were 2 minutes in when a man in a tuxedo lurched toward them. Red-faced, tie loosened, carrying the particular confidence of someone who had 4 drinks and 0 self-awareness. "Here, let me step in," he announced, already reaching. "Rescue you from the hired help." He said it like a kindness. Weston Brooks moved between them. Smooth, unhurried. The way you step in front of something without making it a confrontation. "She's dancing because she wants to," Weston Brooks said evenly. "Not because she needs rescuing." The man blinked, looked at the quiet, unmovable certainty in Weston Brooks's face, reconsidered, shuffled backward. Something shifted in Presley Hale's expression then. Not tears, not yet. Something more like a window cracking open in a room that had been sealed too long. Air moving where no air had moved in a while. "Thank you," she said, barely a whisper. "No one has ever done something like this, without feeling sorry for me first." "I don't feel sorry for you." Weston Brooks met her gaze straight on. "I see a woman who's still standing. That's what I see." Presley Hale smiled, a real one, the kind that starts deep and works its way out slowly, like early light through a curtain. By every account from the people in that room who later described the evening, it was the first genuine smile anyone had seen on Presley Hale's face in 4 years. At the head table, Jonathan Hale rose from his chair, 58 years old, silver-haired, the most powerful person in the building. His jaw was tight, his eyes very bright. He was crying, quietly, the way men of a certain generation cry, as if hoping it goes unnoticed. He had watched his daughter shrink, inch by inch, since the accident. Watched her cancel plans, avoid mirrors, stop wearing the colors she used to love. He'd hired the finest specialists money could reach. He'd reorganized entire board meetings just to spare her a walk past a whispering cluster near the elevator. He had done everything a powerful man could do, and it had not been enough. A waiter had done in 3 minutes what none of it managed. Jonathan Hale pressed his knuckle briefly to his mouth, looked back up. Sometimes the things you cannot buy are the only things that count. And then it happened. As the last notes of the waltz lifted toward the chandeliers, something slipped free from Weston Brooks' vest pocket. Small, pale blue, old cotton, worn soft from years of folding and refolding. It fell to the floor without a sound. Jonathan Hale was already moving, crossing the room at a speed that surprised everyone who saw it, and he bent and picked it up before Weston Brooks had even registered the loss. He turned it over in his hands, saw the embroidery stitched into the corner, 2 initials in gold thread, M.H., beside a small gold star. The color drained from his face. This handkerchief. His voice dropped somewhere unfamiliar, low, shaking at the edges, stripped of every layer of polish. Where did you get this? It belongs to my brother, my younger brother. He looked up at Weston Brooks. Matthew. The orchestra had stopped. The room had stopped. Presley Hale stared at Weston Brooks as though the floor beneath the conversation had just shifted 6 inches to the left. The handkerchief lay in Jonathan Hale's open palm like something sacred. The gold star. The initials, M.H. Weston Brooks looked at it the way you look at something you've carried so long it's become part of your body. And now someone else is holding it, and you feel both relieved and strangely bare. He swallowed once. Matthew Hale, Weston Brooks said. He was my squad leader in Afghanistan 6 years ago this November. Jonathan Hale did not move. Presley Hale pressed her fingers over her mouth. The ballroom was so still you could have heard the candle flames. Weston Brooks told it the way soldiers tell the true ones. Flat, measured. Every word chosen carefully. Because if you let any feeling into your voice, you cannot finish. Their patrol vehicle hit an IED on a road outside Kandahar. The blast flipped the truck and it caught fire immediately. The fast, hungry kind of fire that doesn't give you time to think. Weston Brooks was trapped in the rear seat. His left leg wouldn't respond. The smoke was already pulling his thoughts apart before the heat reached him. Matthew Hale didn't hesitate. He came through the fire and pulled Weston Brooks out. With his hands and his body and whatever a 26-year-old man is made of when he has decided that someone else is going to live today. He dragged Weston Brooks across the road, set him down in the dust, crouched over him for a moment, just looked at him, with the most settled expression Weston Brooks had ever seen on a man in a combat zone. Not fearless. Something quieter than fearless. Decided. Then Matthew Hale turned back toward the truck. The driver was still inside. Don't, Weston Brooks managed. His voice wasn't working properly. Just 2 letters, the only 2 he had left. Matthew Hale went back anyway. The second explosion came 30 seconds later. Weston Brooks had counted. Every year since. The time it takes to pour a glass of water. 30 seconds and a good man was gone. He was calm the whole time. Weston Brooks' voice held, but his throat moved once, a single controlled swallow. The kind of calm that good people have when they've already made their choice and they're just carrying it out. He paused, eyes steady on the far wall. Before he went back, he put that handkerchief in my hand. His mother had embroidered it before he deployed. A beat. He said, "Tell my family to live well. For both of us." For 6 years, Weston Brooks had carried that sentence like a second pulse. On the delivery routes, crouched under cars in February cold, on every hotel shift in every ballroom where he was invisible to everyone in the room. Live well for both of us. He had been trying. Some days, he wasn't sure if he was getting it right. But he had Sophia Brooks. He kept showing up. Jonathan Hale went to his knees, right there on the ballroom floor. He pressed the handkerchief to his chest and wept. Not the careful, dignified kind from earlier. This was the grief that lives behind the last locked door. The kind that only opens when the right key finally arrives. 6 years late. Carried in a waiter's vest pocket. He wept for his brother, for the years of not knowing the full story, for the gap that had never closed, For every holiday dinner where Matthew Hale's chair had stayed empty, and no one had said his name out loud, because it hurt too much, and they hadn't known how to begin. Presley Hale was beside him in an instant, her emerald gown spreading across the marble as she knelt and held her father with both arms. Her own tears came fast and silent, tracing the scar along her jaw.
The room remained absolutely still.
Then Jonathan Hale stood up. He rose slowly, straightened his jacket, took one long, settling breath. When he turned to face the ballroom, his eyes were dry. But something about him had changed in a way that money and rank cannot manufacture. The polish was gone. What was underneath it was older, more honest, far less patient. He turned toward a cluster of guests near the east table, the ones whose whispers had been audible enough to carry across the room earlier that evening. 3, possibly 4 of them. Their expressions had gone carefully blank under his gaze. "Your money," Jonathan Hale said, his voice low and precise, "bought you a seat here tonight. It did not purchase the right to make my daughter feel unwelcome in a room full of people she employs." He let that settle. A man who serves tables walked across this floor and treated her with more dignity than this company's highest donors managed all evening. He looked at each of them in turn, the unhurried, evaluating look of a man who signs the checks and is no longer pretending otherwise. "I hope the drive home is a long one." He nodded to security. They were escorted out without protest. Chairs still warm, glasses still half full. Small details that the room catalogued quietly and would not forget. In the silence that followed, something shifted across the whole ballroom, the way a compass needle swings and finds north. People looked at their own hands, at the man still standing near the dance floor in a pressed black vest. And then Presley Hale stood, chin up, shoulders back. The chandelier light caught the scar along her jaw, and she held her face toward it, without flinching. Her voice shook at the start. Then it found its footing. Tonight, a man who works as a waiter looked at the CEO's daughter and saw a person. Not a liability, not a headline, not something to be managed or avoided. She paused.
He chose kindness when the rest of this room chose silence.
And that, her voice steadied, took more genuine courage than anything I have seen in 4 years of running this company. The applause began at the back, tentative, then committed, rolling forward like something overdue until the room was on its feet. Jonathan Hale said quietly, "One man, working an honest job to raise his daughter alone, showed her more real respect tonight than wealth managed to." Weston Brooks stood in the middle of it all, still a little uncomfortable with being seen, the way genuinely humble people always are. He looked at the floor for a moment, then back up, his jaw set, eyes steady. Presley Hale stepped close. Her voice dropped below the noise. "I'd like to speak with you privately, tonight, if you're willing." She looked at him with clear, direct eyes. "Not about the handkerchief, because of what you did for me." What she asked of him the following morning, and how she tested him, was something nobody in that ballroom could have anticipated. Stay right here. The next chapter of this story is where it gets truly unforgettable. The next morning, the sky over Manhattan was the pale, non-committal gray of an old quilt left too long on a porch railing. Weston Brooks had slept maybe 3 hours. He'd driven back to Queens after midnight, checked on Sophia Brooks, still sound asleep, General Flopsy tucked under her chin, and stood in the kitchen for a while eating cold leftover macaroni at the counter. Because sitting down felt like more than he had left in him. He stared at the old rooster magnet on the fridge. Sophia Brooks had made it in art class, slightly lopsided, googly eyes that had never once lined up right. He'd kept every single craft project she'd ever brought home. The fridge was basically a gallery at this point. He didn't mind, not even a little. Half hidden above the rooster, tucked under a dry cleaner coupon. A photograph. Weston Brooks in his dress uniform, 29 years old, squinting into the Afghan sun. Beside him, arm thrown across his shoulders, grinning like the world was a private joke only the two of them were in on. Matthew Hale. Weston Brooks looked at that photograph for a long while. Long enough that the macaroni went cold on the counter and he didn't notice. His phone buzzed at 7:42. "Mr. Brooks, this is Ms. Hale's assistant. She's asking if you're available to come to the Hale Innovations offices at 10 o'clock this morning. A car will be there at 9:15. He read it twice. Typed back, "I'll be there." The Hale Innovations building occupied the top 3 floors of a midtown tower with more glass than walls and lobby plants that were probably older than Sophia Brooks. An assistant in a silk blouse met Weston Brooks at the elevator and walked him down a corridor that smelled of good coffee and something he could only describe as ambition. Presley Hale was at the window when he entered. She'd traded the emerald gown for a charcoal blazer and dark trousers, hair pulled back. In the clear morning light, the scar along her jaw was more visible than it had been under the soft ballroom chandeliers. And she had made no effort at all to conceal it. That was new. "Sit down," she said. Not unkind, measured. He sat. She turned from the window and studied him, the focused honesty of someone reading a document they intend to hold someone to. "I need to ask you something directly," she said, "and I need a direct answer. All right? Last night, was that purely kindness, or were you hoping for something?" Weston Brooks didn't rush the answer. He thought about Sophia Brooks coming home red-eyed. He thought about Matthew Hale's face in the firelight. He thought about every room he'd been in across 35 years of being the man who didn't quite fit. Every teacher who'd assumed he was trouble. Every manager who'd assumed he was working an angle. "I did it," he said, "because I have a daughter who gets told she doesn't matter because of what her father does for work. I watched someone else be told the same thing across a crowded room. I couldn't stand it." He looked at her steadily. "That's all." She held his gaze for a moment. Something in her shoulders loosened. Then she sat across from him, folded her hands on the desk. "I run a foundation. One of our projects refurbishes school buses for children in rural counties upstate. Kids in the foster system, group homes, underfunded districts. We currently have 3 buses that need serious mechanical work." A pause. "I can't pay you for it." Weston Brooks blinked. "I'm asking you to volunteer." The chin lifted, just slightly. "I want to know whether you'll do it because those children need reliable transportation, not for any connection to this company, not for goodwill, not to impress me, just for them. A test, plainly designed and honestly delivered. The kind that only a person who has been let down by enough people in enough expensive suits learns to construct." Weston Brooks almost smiled. He recognized self-protection when he saw it. He'd done enough of it himself. "When do you need me to start?" Something shifted in her expression, barely perceptible, like a curtain moving an inch in a draft. "Monday, 7 a.m. I'll send the address." He stood. "I'll be there, for the kids." What Weston Brooks couldn't have known was that once he left, Presley Hale sat alone in her office for a long time. She had asked her assistant to quietly pull together background information on him. Nothing invasive, just the kind of picture that forms when you have resources and know which questions to ask. She read the file slowly. 2 job offers in the past 8 months. One from an auto service chain in New Jersey, one from a veterans employment agency in Connecticut. Both solid pay, both turned down. In both cases, the reason was the same. The hours were too long, the commute too far. He needed to be home when Sophia Brooks' school bus arrived. She had therapy on Tuesdays, and every Friday, without exception, they made pancakes for dinner, from scratch. In a chipped blue ceramic bowl his mother had left him, Sophia Brooks standing on her step stool beside him and overseeing the chocolate chips with an enthusiasm that far exceeded her precision. Every Friday, without fail, he had said no to more money to protect that. Presley Hale set the file down. She thought about what it meant. To have something you refused to trade away, not because you couldn't, but because you'd looked at it and decided it was worth more than whatever was being offered. She looked out at the gray Manhattan skyline for a while. She thought about her own mother, about a wet November highway 4 years ago, the way a single second had split her life into before and after, neatly, permanently, the way a photograph tears. She thought about the months following, the men who had been kind, or seemed to be, but always with one eye tracking the name on the building and what it could open for them. Then she thought about a man who had declined 2 salaries to make Friday night pancakes. When she looked back at the desk, she realized she was smiling. Not the composed boardroom version, the real one. The same one that had surprised her in the ballroom the night before. She picked up her phone, started typing, put it down. Picked it up again. "I won't forget you, Weston Brooks." She sent it before reason caught up with her. She did not regret it. What she didn't know yet, what neither of them knew, was that in 3 days, a 2 a.m. phone call would put every unspoken thing between them to its truest test. Keep listening, because what happens next, in a hospital waiting room in Queens at 2 in the morning, is where this story becomes something else entirely. The call came at 2:14 in the morning. Weston Brooks's hand found the phone before his eyes were open. The deep, never fully sleeping alertness of a parent whose child has asthma and a fever and has been checked on every hour since 11 o'clock. But this time, the checking hadn't been enough. Sophia Brooks was struggling to breathe. Shallow pulls of air that weren't becoming real breaths. In the pale glow of the crescent moon nightlight, her face was wrong. Too pale, lips edging toward blue. Her small chest rising and falling with a rhythm that wasn't right. Too fast, too tight, like something was sitting on it that she couldn't push off. He had her in his arms and out the door in under 3 minutes. No jacket, no hesitation, just the weight of her against his chest and the distance to Queens General running through his mind the way a soldier calculates the fastest route out of a bad situation. Automatically, without room for fear. In the cab, holding her close, he did something he hadn't planned. He called Presley Hale, not for her money, not for any advantage. He was a frightened father at 2 in the morning, and she was the only person he could think of who might know the right specialist, the right next step. For a 7-year-old who couldn't pull in a full breath, 2 rings. Weston Brooks. Her voice was immediately present, not groggy, not irritated, simply alert. The way certain people are when you need them, and you don't realize until that exact moment how much you'd been hoping for it. "Sophia's having an attack, fever and respiratory. I'm on the way to Queens General. Do you know a pediatric pulmonologist?" 4 seconds of silence. "I'm coming," she said. "You don't need to. I'm coming." She arrived before Sophia Brooks had been moved from intake to a room. No driver, no assistant, just Presley Hale in a wool coat pulled over what were clearly pajamas. Hair loose, no makeup, the scar along her jaw visible under the flat fluorescent ER lights, giving it no thought whatsoever. She had come the way people come when something matters more than how they look. She spoke with the charge nurse and 2 members of the on-call team. Quietly, without the tone of someone accustomed to pulling rank, but with the focused composure of a person who has decided a child is going to receive proper care tonight, and is simply arranging for that to happen. Within 20 minutes, a pediatric pulmonologist had been reached at home and was on his way in. Weston Brooks sat in a plastic chair in the hallway and watched. He had the particular expression of a man being helped who doesn't quite know what to do with the feeling. Like someone who has spent so many years being the one who shows up for everyone else, that being shown up for feels unfamiliar. Warm, but not quite fitting yet. Like a coat that belongs to someone with the same build. Sophia Brooks responded well. By 4 a.m. she was breathing evenly, color returned, propped against 3 pillows with General Flopsy under one arm. Regarding Presley Hale with the calm, unblinking scrutiny that only small children and cats apply to new people. "Presley Hale, you have a scar," Sophia Brooks said. Weston Brooks started to redirect. Presley Hale stopped him with a small shake of her head. "I do," she said, pulling her chair closer. "Does it still hurt?" Presley Hale considered the question with genuine care. "Not the way it used to. Now it's just part of me." Sophia Brooks reached out and touched the edge of the scar, lightly, with the same careful reverence she used when handling the old photographs on the windowsill at home, as if she understood, without being told, that some things deserve to be touched gently. "My dad has a scar in his heart," she said, "because Mom left." She looked at Presley Hale with eyes that were, as always, about 40 years older than her face. Yours is the same kind. One you can see and one you can't. A pause. But Dad always says kindness makes things better. I think he's right. Presley Hale pressed her lips together. Her eyes filled slowly. She didn't speak for a moment. She just looked at this 7-year-old girl who had arrived in the middle of the night with a fever and an oxygen monitor on her finger, and somehow still found room to think about someone else's pain. She reached out and smoothed the blanket across Sophia Brooks's shoulders, tucked it in at the sides, then sat quietly, her hand resting near the little girl's, not quite holding it, just present. Because sometimes that is the only thing left to offer, and it turns out to be enough. When Sophia Brooks's eyes finally closed, Presley Hale stood and crossed to where Weston Brooks sat. She put her arms around him, the way you hold something when you've just understood how close you came to not having it. He held on back, carefully at first, then not carefully at all. I spent 4 years, she said, voice low against his shoulder, believing that everyone who came near me wanted something I could sign or transfer. The name on the building, the access it bought. She pulled back to look at him. You called me because you were scared for your daughter. That was the whole reason. I called because I trusted you, he said. She looked at him for a long, taking stock moment, the kind where a person stops pretending something isn't valuable. You've been teaching me something, she said, that kindness doesn't need a justification. And it's been, slowly, quietly, putting something back together in me that I thought was just gone. Through the window. Queens was beginning to lighten at the edges, that particular shade of early morning that belongs only to cities. Purple going gray, going gold, slow as a held breath. Down the hall, a cart squeaked past on the linoleum. The vending machine hummed its single, indifferent note. Sophia Brooks slept with General Flopsy tucked under her chin, the same as every night, undisturbed. It was, Weston Brooks thought, standing in a fluorescent-lit hospital hallway at 4:30 in the morning in yesterday's work clothes, one of the finest moments of his life. What was built in the 10 days that followed, carefully, without rush, was the part of the story that turned one act of kindness into something that would last all 3 of them a very long time. 10 days after the hospital. The afternoon light at the Hale estate came through tall windows, the way October light always does, golden and a little melancholy, and completely beautiful. The kind that makes every ordinary moment look like something worth keeping. The kind of light that used to fall across the kitchen table on Thanksgiving afternoon when the house was still full, and the smell of something warm was coming from the oven, and you didn't yet know enough to stop and be grateful for it. Presley Hale had prepared everything carefully, not with fanfare, but with the focused quiet of someone who has spent 4 years moving away from the world and is now, deliberately, moving back toward it, one step at a time, like someone learning to walk on a leg that healed crooked, careful, determined, refusing to stop. She had written a letter, by hand, on monogram stationery, the old-fashioned kind her mother used to keep in the desk by the window, addressed to the principal of Sophia Brooks's school. It didn't ask for anything. It simply told the truth, that Sophia Brooks had sat in a hospital room at 4 in the morning and spoken about kindness and invisible scars with the clarity of someone who had thought about it for years. That she was, in Presley Hale's considered opinion, a genuinely remarkable child. That her father was a man of exceptional character. That the school would be fortunate to protect her confidence rather than allow it to be chipped away by the casual cruelty of other 7-year-olds. She had also arranged a storytelling afternoon at Sophia Brooks's school. Not a presentation, a real one. Presley Hale herself, sitting in a small wooden chair at the front of a second-grade classroom, telling 18 children a story about a scar that had once made her want to stay home from every room. And a night when a kind stranger taught her that standing in the light takes more courage than hiding from it. And that courage is worth more than any title. The teacher had cried quietly at her desk. The children had been unusually still. Sophia Brooks had sat in the front row with her hands folded, the expression of someone whose faith in a specific person has just been publicly confirmed. Quietly, privately vindicated. The way only children can look when the world lines up with what they already knew to be true. On the drive home, she had said, with the easy authority she applied to all settled matters, "Presley Hale is the bravest person I know, except you, Daddy. It's a tie." Weston Brooks had kept his eyes on the road. His jaw moved once. He didn't say anything for a little while. Now the three of them were at the estate for the evening. Unhurried, unscheduled. No performance required from anyone. Sophia Brooks had colonized a corner of the sitting room and constructed what she called a fort of important things. 4 throw pillows, a cashmere blanket, and a decorative antique hat stand that had belonged to the Hale family for 3 decades. General Flopsy now sat atop it like a monarch surveying a realm. Nobody said a word about the hat stand. Presley Hale stood near the fireplace, the warm light falling across the left side of her face. She didn't turn away from it. She held out her hand to Weston Brooks. He raised an eyebrow. "No orchestra." "We'll manage," she said. He took her hand and they danced. Slow, private, to no music except whatever a quiet house plays when it's full of the right people. It was nothing like the ballroom at the Grand Plaza. It was better. The ballroom had been witnessed. This was just theirs. After a moment, Presley Hale said softly, "You put something back together in me, something I'd written off as permanently broken." She looked at him steadily, the direct, clear gaze that had always been her best quality, even when everything else was closed. "I didn't expect that. I wasn't looking for it." "I wasn't either," Weston Brooks said. From the corner, Sophia Brooks assessed the situation, appeared satisfied, returned to her fort. Jonathan Hale arrived near the end of the evening, quietly, carrying something small, a set of car keys on a plain ring, old, worn. The rubber grip of the fob cracked with age. "Matthew Hale's car," he said, holding them out to Weston Brooks. A 1987 Ford Bronco, same year it came off the line, still in the garage where it sat since he deployed. "I couldn't sell it, couldn't drive it." He paused. His voice caught just slightly, the way a man's voice catches when he is about to hand something over that he has been keeping safe for someone who couldn't receive it. "It should be used. It should be out on the road." He pressed the keys in the Weston Brooks's hand and closed both of his own around it, the way fathers do when words are not quite enough and the hands have to finish the thought. "No conditions attached. Use it to open your garage. Keep doing what you do." He held on for a moment longer. Matthew Hale chose the right person to give that handkerchief to. I'm sure of it. Weston Brooks stood with the keys in his palm and thought about a dusty road outside Kandahar, about a face that was settled and certain, about 6 years of carrying a promise in a vest pocket. "Live well for both of us." "Yes, sir," he said. "I will." Sophia Brooks appeared from her fort and inserted herself between them, one hand from each, looking up at both of them with the complete, untroubled confidence of a child who has made a decision about her family and considers the matter closed. Presley Hale leaned close to Weston Brooks. "We changed the first for the 3rd time, but the first time it carried the full weight of everything that had happened since the night she first heard it. I won't forget you, Weston Brooks, and I don't want to." He leaned down and kissed her, gently, honestly. Sophia Brooks produced a sound of elaborate 7-year-old protest and retreated back into her fort. Later that evening, after Sophia Brooks had fallen asleep on the sofa under the cashmere blanket, with General Flopsy in the hat stand still wearing its unlikely crown, Jonathan Hale stood alone for a moment by the mantel. Matthew Hale's handkerchief was there, pressed and folded in its small frame, the gold star catching the firelight. Beside it now, a new photograph, taken earlier that evening. 3 people in a stuffed rabbit, lit by warm October gold. Jonathan Hale looked at it quietly, for a long time, the way you look at something that has finally become what it was always supposed to be. "You asked him to live well for both of you," he thought. "I believe he's finally getting there." He left the lamp on when he walked out. This story was written from a human heart, with a little help from AI. Its only purpose is to whisper softly to you, hold on to kindness, believe in beautiful things. Because even on days that seem completely gray, life is quietly preparing little miracles just for those who refuse to give up.